Everybody, this is Clifford Barcliff. We're now going to talk about VRP, the actual bits itself, no screenshots, just some design, some of the tools we use, some of the capabilities, some of the terms, and a little bit about why we did what we did. So I said earlier about platform, and platform is important. We have to do all these different things. We have to get rid of manual processes, but not just one kind of manual process, but manual processes from the storage team, the virtualization team, the database team, the network team, the cloud team, anybody involved. If it's going to be resilient, you can't have 100 people involved. You need one person when they get the authority to do the work. We also know that customers, none of my customers have just one platform. They may have one hypervisor, but they still have physical. For most of my customers, that's never going to go away. There are certain things that's the best place, that's the most efficient spend, is stay on that physical. I do have many customers with multiple hypervisors. And of course, to us, cloud is just another target, just like, say, Hyper-V and VMware. We also have legacy spend. So I have different data movers out there. Customers don't want to give up huge investments. Those are very expensive investments, and most of them are not going away. The other thing that I see is customers right spend for the right SLA. Got to make sure we support the financial impact of how they do resilience. Not everything needs to the second, or to the minute, or the hour, to the day. So the ability to orchestrate and automate across multiple types of SLAs. So what do? What's the product actually do? So automation, management of boot sequence. We do a lot of work, and you'll see this later on when we look at workflows about data integrity. We're manipulating a lot of bits. So the product does a lot of work in making sure those bits are always there, that we don't mess anything up. As my financial customers say, Cliff, make it available, but don't mess with my data. The broad infrastructure support, we'll see more about that later in the details, but both physical, virtual, cloud. Rehearsals, this will come up over and over and over again. You hear people that do DR testing. We picked that word rehearsal on purpose. Testing is something you do because you have to. It's got zero value. It doesn't actually do anything because when it hits the fan, nobody executes because you don't know. You tested last month, last year. So we spent a lot of time working the product to automate the idea of rehearsals, getting value, improving the value of your IT spend. And we'll show you exactly how we do that later on when I do the demo. And then reporting. People need to see things, need to look at trends. So understanding trends of your risk, trends of your recovery times, your RTOs and RPOs. One data point is useless. Trends are what customers need. All right, so 3 years ago, product was introduced. First of all, any questions? I just covered a lot of things. Now we're starting with just actual product. Product was introduced, and this is what it came out the door with, what most people might call a minimally viable product. We supported VMware, Hyper-V, so VMware to VMware, Hyper-V to Hyper-V. We also supported a variety of third-party data movers. This is what my customer had. This was the immediate need. We also supported a couple of applications right out of the box for self-discovery. Again, automate things. In this case, we came out with Oracle and SQL, and we also built an SDK to allow customers who had their own home-built applications a way to find, manage those applications. And then we added in, about a year later, some of our other products from an orchestration standpoint. So our state machine for those tier 1 products. So now customers who had that huge infrastructure and that investment can orchestrate and have that visibility across that legacy physical infrastructure. So it became a tier of recovery. Then we also added in our data protection as a tier of recovery. And we'll see, again, just how we do it later. The nice thing is, though, from the person who's consuming the product, the day-to-day operator, they don't know and they don't care. It's pretty much taken away from them. They treat everything the same way. So when they see an SLA, they see an SLA. When they want to migrate, they see a migrate. They don't care about the underlying technology. The operational framework, the run book, if you say, doesn't change. Physical to physical, virtual, virtual, virtual cloud, arbitrary number of data movers, data protection, different cloud vendors. It's the same run book, the same steps. Important to a customer, our customers don't have time to learn different ways for different things. So this is one place, one run book.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
If you don't mind. So is AHV not supported for a specific reason, AHV hypervisor, Propolis?
So customer demand. So I can tell you, I personally have only had one customer ask that. They've asked me to support the replication part of it, but because most of the customers today are still using VMware on top. As time goes on and we see customer demand, then the framework exists for us to suck that in, because we did build it so that everything is modularized. So virtualization frameworks modularized. You can suck that in, and all the rest of it, pulls along.
So how long do you think that it takes for you to, say, support another technology, another hypervisor?
So it'll depend on where you're going from. If it's on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to cloud, because there's a lot of different orchestration has to happen.
The reason why I
Go ahead.
ask is because if you're going to wait for customer demand, and customer demand comes at a certain point.
Oh, sure.
So in the meantime, the customer is thinking, why should I go for Veritas if it's not already supporting the hypervisor I'm going to go or already have?
Right.
So why? Because we do know that it's deployed in quite widely already.
Absolutely. Again, what we see from the market is the customers who responded so far, most of them have implemented VMware on top of Nutanix. They've not implemented the native hypervisor. But we know customers are, in fact, already customers who are existing are now migrating. They sucked in an infrastructure, they started with VMware, and now they're going, I like this, I like Acropolis, and now I'm going to migrate to that. It's a timing thing. I cannot speak for engineering backline as far as what that takes, but Joanne, do you know anything?
It really is quite simple because you use the APIs, obviously. But the question is, yes, I understand your point that you have to balance out the demand versus having it ready for when the customers want it. But from a product management perspective, there is that double-edged sword that you have to walk that line. Because obviously you don't want to go do a hypervisor and then have it disappear because no one's using it. Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah. And I will say we have a large backlog of demand for different capabilities because we support many different things. We don't just support just one thing. We don't support just, it's not just a data mover. The engineering folks, they have a lot of work ahead of them. The demand is very high for, as soon as the customer sees something, they go, oh, we like that, but can you do it this way instead? It's financial, right? As soon as we grab the next highest demand thing, then we do the next one. So we started off very simple, just to get a product out there and get customers consuming it. And we realized, hey, you would have surprised me that they cared about orchestrating data protection. But it became actually a very important use case, and so we added it. But we actually had to add APIs into that product so we could consume it. So that's how we see things. So it's really just a matter of priority. It's fairly quick. So up until this year, we were on a quarterly release cycle. It's very agile. Day to day, week to week, you would look at I used to be a stakeholder, and I would log into the sprint events, and I didn't vote because I didn't want to weigh in so much, but you'd see the priorities change constantly, and it's a financial thing. But the bigger deals, that's who gets first, yeah.
But that's exactly what I'm saying, that because if you could say yourself that some of the work you did very quickly, then it may not be such a bad thing to do in advance of you seeing the demand, because we already know, as we also see the market, that it's not that AHV isn't out there. Quite a lot of companies have actually deployed it.
Yes.
When they're deciding about a platform to go for, or a tool, or your solution, they would need to know that you are already going to cater for that before actually buying it. If they have to decide between products, they would naturally go for a product that already supports it.
Absolutely, I agree. Again, it's just priorities.
Okay, fair enough.
And then we'll talk a little bit later as you see some other things at the arc of the product that at the price came up. Again, I'm just starting to see it now where I actually have people in the field going, Cliff, you're going to do this presentation, but we don't support it. So you have to let them know right up front we don't support it. It's just starting, I will tell you, from what the field tells me.
Okay.
And I'm field facing every day. So thank you for the question. Let's see. And then, then we added our own data mover. So this was something that we planned for a long time. A data mover is not a simple undertaking. Anybody's ever had to look at that, moving those kinds of bits, you can't mess with people's data. So right order fidelity and the integrity, scale, these are really hard things to accomplish with a data mover. Now, luckily, we have IP going back many decades where we've done this already, but we haven't been doing it in a way where it's outside the host. We always did it on the host. And we've done it at scale with all of the right features that you would expect. So we started off with just VMware to VMware, using the native filtering that VMware provides, 6.0 update 1, I think it was. So having a data mover, a filter that's outside the guest, so no in-guest footprint, allowing customers to go from any place where VMware existed to any other place where VMware existed. We had so many customers who had different storage at either end, so they didn't have a data mover from a hardware standpoint. And we also knew we needed to get to there because the next step was going to be actually public cloud. And of course, then you need a software-defined data mover to move bits on-prem to the public cloud. Question? I'll dive, by the way, more into that technically in a moment. So some components and terms. I'll have a Resiliency Manager. This is a brain, and you'll see the brain in a moment. This is where we store the little bit of state that we do store. The state of objects, workflows, correlations, things like that. We have an Infrastructure Manager. This is where we scale out. So customers, you can start off quite small, but customers, supporting thousands of workloads, and they just scale out. And this is the IMS is our worker bee. It's the one that does the heavy lifting. It's the one that's going out there scanning objects and pulling them in so we can correlate. It's the one looking at status of things. It's the one executing the workflows, executing the APIs that hit off various workflows. And then we have Replication Appliances. That's exactly what you think. It's where we move data. Resiliency domain is the largest scope of how customer, the boundary of the product. A resiliency group is the smallest point of thing that we manage. Right now, that's one single VM, but it could be 10 VMs or 100 VMs. And it's limited to the underlying technology. So in a resiliency group, it's just VMware, just Hyper-V, just applications, and just clients. Here we get some more advanced stuff. So virtual business services, this is where I start managing to the blinking cursor as opposed to the individual machine. Right? Nobody's ever gotten woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning for a VM going down. They get woken up when the blinking cursor doesn't blink anymore. So that's where customers start putting logic into the product. So instead of me orchestrating and managing to and reporting against 20 objects, I report against one object. I manage against one object. That's a virtual business service. I'll show you a small example of that later.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Going back,
Yeah.
You said that it's either one VM or one application. If that application is a database, earlier, how far into that database can I go?
So today, when I talk about application, I'm using what the app can do. So I'm starting the database, stopping the database, or making it passive here, making it active there. That's where. So no agent framework inside.
Okay.
Customers have gone back and forth with that, by the way. How much do they want us to do inside? And because we've been doing that forever. I have an agent framework for 150 different things that go on out there. And customers have created hundreds others for themselves. But it's intrusive, it has to be maintained, it's a process that runs. Customers eventually decide, no, they either want that and will use that part of the product, or no, we'll step back and we'll just look at the workload itself.
Do you support Oracle Cloud as a target?
As a target, no, not today. So the good thing is that is actually on, our radar.
Right.
I'll show you in a moment which ones we do support. But the nice thing is we've already done 4 of them. Mm-hmm. 2 that you don't see, 2 that you do see. Because we actually do work with some private providers.
Right.
And they use our solution into their private cloud. So one's an OpenStack cloud, the other's a vDirector cloud. But we've now gone so many times, so it's not a whole lot. And that is actually a roadmap item to support Google, support Oracle.
Right. So, and that's also based on customer demand, or you have...
Customer demand is just, how much do we want to, what's first, second, third, yeah. Again, I have quite a bit of backload already in that area for capabilities in the cloud, with Amazon AWS, with OpenStack, and vCloud Director.
Right.
And so we have providers who who have big data centers who are either OpenStack based or vCloud Director based. And so we built those as a target for them to either suck customers into their environment, migration, or providing DR as a service.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another idea is service level objectives. So this is where customers will drop buckets of workloads and manage to. So some things don't need 5 minutes recovery point managed to. Some need a second, some need a day, some need an hour. So customers can define and drop those workloads into these buckets. We'll talk in a little bit later about APIs and what we expect to happen very soon, where more software defined, where we become just a few lines of XML and somebody's software-defined workload creation. Pick the workload, pick the bucket name, and they never see our console. Again, that's where we're headed. Okay? But that's why we have it in here. There's a framework. Once they define what that company's RTOs and RPOs are, then whoever's the DevOps person could just say, yep, that's where it goes, and it lands in there. So we have a modern GUI and the data mover. So we support our own. We support we do support Hyper-V's, snapshot based, and then a variety of third parties. I'm not even sure if that's even up to date. That is very easy. That's intellectual property we've had for a long time. We already know how to manipulate every major replication technology from a hardware provider today. So for us, it's a qualification effort, and we plug it in, and it works. And these happen like on dot releases. As soon as somebody says, basically as soon as the customer says we want it, engineering qualifies it, and it gets added into the product. That's a very nimble thing. And there are so many data movers out there. The Acropolis data mover being one of them, where they want to use that since they paid for the software, they want to use it. So what does the architecture look like at a very high level? A brain in each location. You could have multiple brains for resiliency. The brains aren't doing that much work. They're just storing some state. What's the state of the object, workflows, correlations tied to those objects. Basically just a lot of matrix of how things are all connected and where they are right this second. And then there's an infrastructure manager that for each data center, you can have lots of these. They're fairly stateless. So if something breaks, not a real big deal. But they're the ones who just execute things. So they're the ones who go out and scan every time the customer adds a bunch of VMs. So on a regular basis, we'll scan vCenter and pull them in and say, hey, you've got 10 more workloads. What do you want to do with them? And that's, again, once it's been defined, the customer doesn't have to do anything. It's just every morning, somebody logs in, there's a bunch of unprotected workloads, and they can decide whether or not they want to take them in. Same thing for storage. That's the thing that's correlating today, the back-end hardware storage. So if I have a snap mirror, I'm making sure that the VMs that I pull in, I'm also looking at the back, looking at the storage, making sure that it's in a replication group. If it's not, warning that customer, hey, you can't protect this because it's not in a replication group. Or if the storage admin does something at 3 o'clock in the morning on change control and breaks it, we'll alert them ahead of time, hey, this is no longer working. Somebody broke your correlation between your backend and your virtualization. And And these IMS is also one that talk to hosts, talk to physical hosts, to applications and databases. So you send a query out and say, hey, shut down. You're now primary. Go ahead and turn on. It's talking to the different technology like virtualization. So all the APIs for Hyper-V, VMware, OpenStack, and of course the various clouds. And I also mentioned hardware enclosures. They're not going away. My customers, like you mentioned, sir, about the Nutanix, customers want 100%. That's what they want. They want a product to cover everything, not 10%, not 50, not 80, not 90. They want 100. And so that is a lot of the reasons why it's a platform. Because in order to do that, we've had to build it in a little bit more complicated way. So the RMs are talking between each other. They're keeping consistency, so the state is maintained among multiple. So if I log into one, log into the other, I see the same thing as a customer. And then inside the Resiliency Manager itself. So I'll always like to point out this is a new product. There are no legacy bits. This is freshly developed, purpose-built. And you can see it's very segmented, compartmentalized, so that we can adopt a new technology. We can adopt a new cloud. We can adopt new risk signatures, so on and so forth, without interrupting the rest of the product. So it allows the teams to be quite agile. And as customers say, hey, I have a new widget, can you support it? Okay, give us enough money and we'll do it. That's the fact that everything is separated. You'll see we're using Cassandra, we're using RabbitMQ, all the new types of tools that you'd expect from a brand new product. There's a risk analysis engine. That's the thing that we have defined risks. We're thinking about maybe letting customers make their own. We have a series of defined risks. As customers ask, we put new risks in. These are like these correlations risks, like I mentioned earlier. Hey, your vCenter there's not enough room at the other side, or you're running out of your subscription space in your cloud. So those kinds of risks. So as customers find and uncover new things, or we recognize, we can just plug those in. The SLA management, again, its own module, separate, so that we can make changes to policy-based management. Let's talk about one thing we don't have up here, APIs. So this is something that I've been asking for a long time. The demand isn't huge yet for the customer, but pretty much every customer says at some point you have to have this. So that means, like I mentioned earlier, the ability to not use the console, to just become a software-defined tool for resiliency. So putting in assets, deleting assets, reporting, so forth. So right this minute, we're looking on reporting APIs. And then the arc of the product will be then eventually you'll see we're doing gets, eventually we'll start doing puts. The ability to drop a workload in from your HTML file, your XML file that describes your workload in vRealize, or pick your in Cisco, or pick your software-defined data center management.
So I know you can't really maybe get into roadmaps and give us specifics, but how soon is that closer?
So the gets for reporting are actually now puts. I don't have insight into that. Okay, but it's definitely a very important ask, especially from our larger customers who are already far down the software-defined data center environment. It's a requirement. They're willing to wait. I've never had somebody say no because they're still young in this. I mean, it's a big lift to build that framework, build that catalog and the workflow. But for larger customers who have thousands and tens of thousands of workloads, it's necessary. So they realize, and so they're willing to wait right now. It is there. The capability is there. They're not exposed. And we just haven't hardened them yet. We haven't said, hey, it's not going to change. Because once you expose an API, changing it is perilous. So you have to be very careful, especially about if you're going to make a change. Pulling out data, you might make a customer angry, but you're not probably going to break anything. But when you're going to change and do a put and modify something, it better be rock solid. It better not change for some length of time.
So when you do release your API, is it going to be versioned as well or no? So the customer can pick which version they want to lock into?
So we don't know because we only have one other product, two other products that have, and we've only gotten through one version of APIs. I expect, Joanne, I don't know if you can speak to it or not. Does that have come up?
So as Cliff mentioned, we're working on it and still like deciding what was the best approach to take. So haven't confirmed it on yet.
Yeah. We already come across the problem for ourselves, for example, with Azure, going to Azure versus Azure Stack. Different version of APIs. So it looks the same, but it really isn't. And so we're actually working on, how we can give our customers the ability to do both because those API versions are different. Good enough?
Yep.
Okay, the data mover. This is usually pretty popular. People care about how their bits are being touched. It's one thing to show pretty pictures, but when I touch my bits, be careful. So it's deployed today on-prem. It can be deployed anywhere in a hypervisor. So it doesn't necessarily have to be co-located, but it's usually within a cluster. That's the boundary. So in both in VMware and Hyper-V, it's within the cluster at least one. And then you scale depending on your performance and amount of storage that you're moving. Right now, we have two different ways of moving data. Today, we have using the VIO filter between VMware and VMware. Right? Nothing in the guest, using all the native APIs, doing all the right things when it comes to filtering and moving bits around. It's no impact to the customer. The gateways themselves are fairly stateless. I'll talk about that in a moment. The state is managed in either those bitmaps that are in the filter, and then I'll talk about another one in a second. Let's see. Maintains fidelity, so very, very important, right order fidelity. So everything is always crash consistent at the other side. Right? We're not snapshotting and moving something. It's continuous bits being written down, packaged up, last write, compressed, encrypt, sent over the wire. Another replication gateway catches it, catches these sets, unpacks everything, puts everything in right order fidelity, and I'll tell you exactly how we do that in a second.
Well, how is this different from Recover Point?
So today we chose to do this as an actual disk level, and I'll explain in a second. So the appliance isn't actually grabbing up and storing the data. We're always maintaining the native format of the write at the target, and I'll show more of that in a second. It's an important question because it does change my RTOs. I'll show you that in a moment.
I have a different question before we move on. So you mentioned consistency. I heard you say crash consistency on the slides. I do see app consistency.
So no app consistency today. So it's just crash consistent.
Okay.
Right. For customers who need it and they want to manage the app, then we can manage the app. And I can also, through the customers who have this, that 0 seconds on either side, I can also manage it through the other product and just manage it as a tier. But this product itself, this data mover does not do app-based. Okay. It's only the workload-based.
So you said this data mover, is this architecture applicable to the others as well? So for different hypervisors or?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it's the same. Let me clarify. I give paycheck answers. If I don't, I'll tell you. So I have two different ways of moving data. Right now, native drivers filtering for VMware. Mm-hmm. When I go to public cloud, I use a lot of the same bits, but I use a tap because I need some independence. And that tap is the same tap no matter what hypervisor. So it's the same for VMware, right. Same for Hyper-V, same for OpenStack, same for the clouds. Okay. Same tap. It's a small little bit that runs in user space, has a bitmap that's stored in a tiny little virtual disk, so that as we see things being changed, we then capture those writes. That bitmap doesn't get updated until we know that it's on the other side. So the gateways themselves have very little state, so they can be switched out. If I lose a gateway, I don't have to resynchronize. I'm just going to catch up with the dirty writes and reapply them.
And just for clarification, when you say that it's crash consistent, except and it doesn't handle apps, does that include the apps that you do support currently, your database apps?
So those are being done through, so I'm just stopping the app, I'm starting the app. So I'm using, at that point, I'm just orchestrating what the app already does.
Gotcha.
So if pick, whether it's an SAP application or Data Guard, we're manipulating those, right? We're telling them what to do and they're doing their thing.
Okay.
Right. So whatever the app provides, we orchestrate. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not snapping. Just stopping, starting, making sure that things happen in the right order, DNS gets updated, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Got it? Let's see. I talked about. So we have a set of appliances. The appliances are paired up. Today we support one-to-one. So for a particular workload, they can go to one place. I have a backlog requests that customers want, especially in Europe, where the requirements to have a jump, they need a close requirement, far requirement. That's for people who submit certain requirements in Europe. They're required to have a close resiliency and far resiliency, so they need one-to-many. Some customers have also asked for cascaded, A to B, B to C. Again, that's something that we're going to do. It's just time, but it's an important customer request. And we recognize that one-to-one is great for most folks, but many people have requirement.
And with that feature of one-to-many coming, will it also support those many being different clouds or different targets? So it might be my own separate side on this VMware, and then the third might be a cloud.
Actually, that's actually a requirement. That's a table stakes. Do I talk about it in a second here? So let's talk about what we actually do. So we're gathering data in a continuous fashion. So I have an I/O receiver. I have something that gathers bits and sets. I transmit it. Somebody else catches it and applies it. There's an internal scheduler that's looking at these sets coming from all over the place, right? One gateway can have many different things running on it. It doesn't have to be just one VM. It can be lots of different VMs all doing their thing. And then there is the coordination of what's going on, and we'll see that coordination later on when I show you workflows within the product. So, hey, do I need flushing replication, stopping it, starting it, reversing it, all that good stuff. So an important point to you, talk about going to multiple places. So we always, as a design, have decided that we're going to, from the source, filter and grab, either through on-prem native filters or through our I/O tap. At the target, we're always going to write in the native format. And you'll see later on when I show you a workflow, how we prepare a workload, that at the target, I'm actually going to get storage that target's native idea of storage, attach it to my gateway, and apply it so that it's applied. So then, if it was a boot disk, that thing is a boot disk outside of our product, so that you could pull our product, or if we broke at a time of crisis, my customer, the disks are there, all they have to do is instantiate them. So it's always in the native format. At the time of rehearsing or takeover, all we're doing is detaching from our gateway and working with whoever the other thing at the other hypervisor or cloud, attaching to an instance, type, create, boot. So it's always in the native format at the other side.
The question I have is, do you have any specific use cases, successful customer stories, based on what we're talking about here?
For just the data?
Yeah, data mover.
Well, so this was a huge ask for customers. They didn't want it either. They didn't own one. They didn't like it. They didn't want to pay for it. It was, a lot of them work at too big of a, they're too gross. They're not fine enough. So they want something where they can pick and micro pick movement. So this was a requirement right out of the get-go. So about 2 years into the product, we had the data. So all of my customers pretty much use it, unless they have legacy data movers. They all use it. And of course, everybody going to cloud, of course, they all use it. So it's everybody's using it. It doesn't already have a third-party data mover. If I bought SRDF, if I bought, SnapMirror, Hitachi, continuous access. I spent a lot of money, and I have very ultra low latency bandwidth. I'm not ripping that out because that was costly to put in, and it served a particular purpose. So I'm going to manage and orchestrate it. But for everybody else, they're using the software data mover.
So for customers who already have a data mover, you guys are just a front end to that.
Yeah, so we'll discover. So you point us to your management server, and we suck all the objects in. And we correlate the objects between different things that are going on so that we know, you say you want to protect this workload? You can't because it doesn't match to, because we're looking at the other side too. We recognize that this LUN is part of a replication set. There's no peer at the other side, so we'll warn you. We'll also warn you when it breaks, which has helped actually customers out quite a bit. When storage admin makes a change and the VMware admin doesn't see a change, they won't see the change until there's an event or they try to do a test. So we catch it right away.
I'm a bit confused. Is this solution purely software and therefore it completely replaces the array-based replication?
So for customers who don't want to use array-based, it replaces it completely. They don't have to use it.
But you can also use that one?
Yeah, so you can have multiple. So I have customers with many workloads, legacy, they're using the array, but other workloads in the same data center, they're using ours.
Because from the operational point of view, it's completely different to protect a virtual machine using replication based on software rather than replication based on LUN replication.
Right.
So I think this is a crucial point in terms of architecture of the solution.
Yeah. So from a customer standpoint, from a day-to-day ops, they don't see the difference. So the person who has to take care of rehearsing, migrating, and reporting and keeping after things, they don't know or care. Now, I'll show you later. They'll see, hey, this workload is being protected by data protection. This workload is using our data mover. This workload is using SnapMirror. And we're also, when we have those other workloads, we're also, hey, what's the latency? How far behind are you? So we're reporting all that. So we're giving a customer a lot of visibility, but we're giving it to the person who actually really cares. The person in operations and the person in business continuity management. What's the state of my state? Not of my last test, but of right this second for the workload that I care about. Not the 1,000 that are out there, but for the 10 that I care about. What's the state of the state?
So the primary use case is that you provide a single pane of glass for all of the replication in an environment.
I don't like to say that because that's a bad idea these days. But yes, from a customer standpoint, I get rid of that complexity.
So can we see it?
Yeah, give me just.
Shall I move on to the demo?
Yeah.
I'm really curious.
Okay. Again, an engine. Again, it's important. I do have a framework. This is what it looks like in AWS. It's very common. This is their template, right? So on-prem, I have some infrastructure, and then usually through a gateway, I have a brain, one or more infrastructure managers, replication gateways. We have CloudFormation templates, AMI, so that for AWS, it's a point and click. We ask all the questions. Give me your networks. Give me your primary networks, your DR networks, your testing networks, your security. What are your security groups? How do you want them applied? They push the button, and the appliances get deployed.
Or it could suck in a CloudFormation template if I've already written one.
Oh yeah, they already. So yeah, we have ours. They have to do it over again. Yes, if you already saved it, you can. Yeah, but we give them the template with all the minimum questions required to deploy and configure in the way that's. We did a lot of work with AWS, and we did a lot of work. We're doing a lot of work with Azure too to do things their way. Point in case is. Amazon says, hey, primary storage should be object, S3. EBS, great, but the primary thing should always be, and they push and pushing. So they pushed us, actually. They pushed back hard. Said, no, we'll give you all the blessings, and we'll support you and give you all the kudos you want, but give your customers a choice to go to S3 first. So we also gave the capability of, instead of going from gateway to gateway, to suck into a gateway object. And that gateway is S3 storage, a big bucket, and then some SNS, notification services, queue services, some Dynamo. I forget, there's a third or fourth one in there. So then we're taking those objects, so all those writes and those update sets are being stored as objects. That does a couple things for customers. For customers who want to massively migrate, they don't have to put a lot of our gateway infrastructure. Since it's a one-time thing, they just need a big bucket that's arbitrarily big. So it's freedom to the customer. It also, since that bucket is so highly available and so resilient, it also makes our infrastructure less susceptible. So that replication can keep going even if we break. That was pretty much a demand from Amazon that we implemented, an option. So customers can do either way. They can go direct to EBS or stage it and then flush it. It's being flushed to EBS eventually, but to have that primary.
So when you're in an environment, when you're talking to a new customer, new potential one, how do you differentiate what you do compared to the competition? What are the things that you offer them that the other people in this space don't offer? What makes a win for you?
So for me, it's hitting close to 100% of the environment. That's key. That's an ask from my enterprise customers. You have to hit everything. If we're going to standardize on something, it's got to hit all my points. The other thing really is the idea that we've really pushed this idea of doing things from a target standpoint in the native format, so that in the time of when bad things happen, my recovery points are quite quick. RTOs are quite quick because I'm not doing anything other than I'm not moving any data. I'm not taking it off an appliance. I'm not manipulating, converting. There's no converting going on. Everything is happening in the native format. So RTOs, very important. And I've actually gone head-to-head with some of my competition, and that's one place where I win, where I can give very consistent RTOs because I'm not doing anything that's special. I've already done all the work up front because that's how I designed it.
In this case,
Go ahead.
For AWS, so it's, say, another data center in this case, for example, replicating over there. Do you manage to do the same kind of resilience in this case? So something happens on the primary side. What happens on AWS?
Okay, so you mean, so from a customer standpoint, what's the customer happen? So we give them choices. They can say, hey, I want to take over. Something's broken and I'm not going to fix it. Or I can't fix it. I want to go ahead and use my target. We actually give them an extra checkbox. You really sure want to do a takeover. Warning, depending on the sky is blue and if you're left-footed, whether you might lose some data because you don't know if the state of things being flushed, we will attempt to contact the other data center, shut down, stop, flush any. So if I still have access to my infrastructure, I will try to flush and make sure that I have a clean, so I grabbed the last bit that was known and get it to me and apply it to the cloud. And then I will turn things on. Turn things on in the right subnets. So in this case, into the production subnet at the target. Let's see, in all the right orders. Update any name services that have to be updated for the customer to work. Not everybody spans IP. So the different IP addresses that they see internally. There's also the opportunity for them to configure, hey, before a certain step, I have to do something. I have to kick an AS400. I have to kick a mainframe. So they have the ability to pause at certain areas to do things that are outside of everybody's control, and then continue on. And now they have a running data center or running application.
It's the same on AWS as well?
So yeah, it doesn't matter where the failure happens. Yes.
And then disaster has gone away. And normally you typically...
We do, and we have a resync process, right. So let's just imagine two use cases. One, minor interruption. I lost my network and it's not coming back. I haven't lost my data center, but I'm not replicating and it's not going to happen anytime soon. I make the decision. I made a decision, by the way, because I have a report, and that report shows me that I've done this 100 times in the last 100 days, and it works, and it takes 5 minutes. Execute. Execute. Network comes back, the provider does their thing. So my infrastructure hasn't changed. I kick off a resync. We go and we see, oh, there's a bunch of VMs. They're still up and running. Okay, shut them down. Reestablish replication. If it wasn't a big break, which just changed, just push those small bits back. If it was a real disaster where I lost infrastructure, then the customer puts themselves together. And then since, where am I? This brain, this Resiliency Manager, has those configurations of what it looked like before. It'll go ahead and, okay, grab some storage, this type from this pool. That's where it was, this data pool, VMware, right? All the right things that it had before. Hey, your networks are still there, good, I'll do the right correlation networks. Oh, there's different networks, rediscover the networks. Prompt you to repair your production networks and your testing networks. And then resync, and then if you want to come back on, push the button, stop, start.
Can't wait for the demo.
Okay. And where things happen, again, doesn't matter. Reference architecture, very similar to AWS, to Azure. Same types of things. We prompt you through. I do have an an Azure version of this, but from a user standpoint, it doesn't look any different. On the back end, they're called different things on the back end, but we manipulate all the same types of objects: security, storage, snapshots, instances. They're called different things, but from the user standpoint, no different.